Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today is going to be a fun episode with Trail Kreitzer of Go Hunt Insider, and we're going to pile through all of Utah. We're going to talk about the big game drawing, the applications that are due here March 1st, 2018. Make sure to get them in prior to that deadline. We're going to go through all of the units. Trail's going to pour out his knowledge on this podcast about those units. Before we get into that, I want to thank the sponsors of this podcast. Go Hunt Insider is the title sponsor. Appreciate their sponsorship, and want to remind you guys that if you want to sign up for an Insider membership, use the J. Scott promo code. When you do so, go to gohunt.com/insider, follow the prompts there. Use the J. Scott promo code. You're going to get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card, and you can use that towards future purchases in the gear shop. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. I want to thank Kuiu Ultralight Hunting for making the best mountain hunting gear available on the market. You can go to kuiu.com. You can also follow them on Instagram and on Facebook. I want to thank phonescope.com, Cheston Davis. Their company makes the best adapters that adapt a spotting scope or any optic to your cell phone, to whatever cell phone you have. They have the ability to adapt to any optic out there. And if you use the JScott16 promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount at phonescope.com. And the Outdoorsman's, the Optics Authority, Cody Nelson and his crew in Arizona. They are the Optics Authority. If you use the J. Scott promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount there at the Outdoorsman's. Also on outdoorsmans.com, or you can call 1-800-291-8065. Use the J. Scott promo code. Guys, I want to thank you for all of your support of this podcast. If you want to send me an email, you can do so at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can also follow along my Instagram page. You can send me a direct message there at jscottoutdoors. You can follow along on my website as well, jscottoutdoors.com. And it was great seeing all you guys at the Western Hunting Expo in Utah, as well as this last weekend in Nashville, Tennessee, at the NWTF banquet. Had lots of podcast listeners, both at the expo and at the convention, come up, and this podcast truly wouldn't be possible without the loyal support that you guys show it every single day, and I just appreciate each and every one of you. Let's get right into this episode with Trail Kreitzer. We're going to be breaking down Utah with several other outfitters and several other contacts in the industry over the next few days. Don't forget, we're about 11 days out or so, 10 days out from the deadline, March 1st in Utah, and then we're going to be moving on to the other western states here. So we're going to try and get you as much good information on all these western states so you can put in and make a good informed decision. So thanks for the support. Let's get right to this episode. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Trail Kreitzer from GoHunt.com. Trail, how you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, finally getting some snow here in southern Utah, so today's been a good day.
Yeah, a bunch of my Utah buddies have been sending me texts and what have you and pictures of the snow. So I've heard that you guys are much like Arizona, which is not uncommon, that you guys kind of have about the same weather patterns that we do. But speak a little bit about your Utah situation up until now as far as moisture year on year. How does it look compared to other years?
It's been bad. I would say it's probably been one of the driest winters that I can remember. When I was putting together some of the app strategy articles for the Go Hunt Insider, I was looking at some of the snowpack totals, and it looks like we maybe have the worst snowpack that we've had since 1977, which they called the winter of no snow. So that's how bad it's been. But Today certainly helps. I mean, here in Cedar City where I'm at, looks like we probably got maybe 4 or 5 inches in the valley, and hopefully we got quite a bit up in the mountains. But even still, I was just looking at the snowpack totals, and even as is, I mean, we're still less than 50% through a lot of the state, especially through the southern end of the state. Up there in the northern half of the state, those guys are like maybe 70%, 76%, but still we're in rough shape as far as snowpack goes and moisture this year.
Trail, I've talked about on my podcast when I was going over a bunch of the Arizona stuff and talking about the drought and, how it affects, 1, bugling for elk, and 2, antler development. Then, with the deer, antler development and what have you. My question would be, does the drought being, say, below 50% of normal in most of southern Utah and, 70% of normal in the northern parts, does that change your strategy? Or if you were advising someone on looking at applying for, say, either an elk or a deer tag, is that something that would make you, shy away from trying to draw? Talk a little bit about your thoughts on that subject.
It definitely does have the impact to impact antler development. So if we don't get some spring rains and we don't get the vegetation that we should, you definitely could see some of those bulls with big bottom ends and kind of peter out towards the top end, and they just don't finish out. So it is a concern. I would say right now I probably would still encourage people to apply as they normally would, and hope that we get some of those late spring rains and some of those early summer rains, and we still have good feed and good antler development. The great thing about Utah is that you can turn your tag back in. So if you were to draw a permit and you spent your summer scouting and it just wasn't turning up the type of bull or buck that you were hoping for, you could always turn that permit back in and get your points back. Now you're gonna eat the cost of that permit, but at least if you're sitting on a stack of points, 15 points plus, and you draw a permit, and being able to turn it back in is definitely worth getting your points back, even if you have to eat the cost of the permit. So I would say right now, I mean, my encouragement would be to, have some faith and apply as you normally would, but definitely keep an eye on it.
Okay, for sure. For those of the listeners out there that maybe aren't as familiar with the Utah draw system, can you take a second here to just kind of give a brief overview of how Utah does their draw? One thing I'm noticing is, I apply in Utah every year, and the non-resident hunting license is $85. And the one thing that's super cool is once you buy that license, then you can go ahead and apply, for the bighorn sheep and moose and Rocky Mountain bighorn, the goat, the bison, elk. In other words, once you have that license, it's I think it's only $10 per species to draw. But go over kind of general overview of how Utah works.
Yeah. So a resident or a non-resident, you have to buy a hunting license in order to apply. And it's actually only $65 for a non-resident if you just want the hunting license. If you want to buy a combo license that has the fishing license with it, then it's going to be $85. But if you don't have a chance to come out in Utah and use your fishing license, then you can just buy the $65 hunting license and go ahead and apply. Another little trick that it's been noted before, and a few guys have kind of picked up onto it, but it's a 365-day hunting license. So you could actually purchase that license towards the end of the application period and apply for your hunts. And the following year, you could actually apply again early on in the draw period, and you could actually use that license to apply for 2 years. Another kind of a quirky thing about Utah is you actually don't have to have a valid hunting license to hunt. If you draw a permit, that now becomes your license or your hunting permit, and that's all you need to actually hunt. So that's kind of why that loophole works. So, if you're a non-resident and you're looking to apply in Utah and save a little bit of extra cash, that's one way to do it. Yeah, you have to.
Well, I just want to ask one question there, just to specify the deadline period. I believe is March 1st. So let's say you bought your hunting license on the 25th of February, and you went ahead and applied for this year. The following year, so the next season, as long as you applied before February 25th, so let's say you applied February 23rd, at the time of applying, that license would still be valid. So in other words, for that $65, you in essence just applied for 2 years under that $65 rather than buying a new license every year.
Correct. Yep. That's how that works. And even if you, like I said, even if you draw a permit, you don't have to buy another one. I mean, it's good to go. Your permit now becomes your hunting license in essence. So, kind of go ahead.
You apply online as well, right? So if you need a license, it will prompt you saying that your license is expired, correct?
It does, yeah. It's pretty handy when you apply. If you don't have a license, it'll prompt you to buy one when you apply. And you can apply online, or you can actually call any division office and apply there on the telephone if you prefer to do that. I would say it's a whole lot easier to just jump online and do it. It's a pretty simple and easy process to get applied. Yeah, Utah gives 10% of their permits to non-residents. The other 90% are going to residents. Utah kind of has an interesting system for limited entry species. What they do is they have a bonus point system. So the number of bonus points that you have is essentially the number of times that your name goes in the hat for the draw. So statistically, the more bonus points that you've got, your better chances of drawing. It's also kind of a modified system. So what they do is they actually take half of the permits for any given hunt, and they give those to the guys with the most bonus points, and then the other half are randomly drawn. We often get asked what happens if there's only one permit. So that if there's only one permit, it will be randomly drawn. And so that's why, a non-resident applying for the first time, even for some of those once-in-a-lifetime species like, moose, sheep, or goat, you have some chance. It's not a great chance, but you definitely have some chance.
And is that also trail in the situation like where you have, say, an elk permit, say on the beaver, there's one non-resident permit, and I could be wrong, I haven't looked at the new apps here yet, I'm just diving into them, but if there's only one permit, it's totally random, meaning I could have max points or I could have no points, and I can still go into that pool, and it's a completely random draw, right?
Correct. Yeah, totally random. And I mean, you could draw with 0 points. My wife actually drew a tag this year with 0 points. She finished Hunter's Ed 5 days before the deadline last year and drew, one of the best elk units in the state. So it's always a possibility. Kind of a neat thing in Utah. You just never know when lightning might strike, and you might be the lucky guy that gets a permit of a lifetime. So pretty cool opportunity.
For sure. And definitely, would you say someone that maybe has not been applying and is listening to this podcast for the first time, Utah is definitely one of those states, like we just said, that, you have a chance. And so don't feel like if you don't have points, you're not going to get drawn, because just like Trail said, his wife drew first year putting in one of the best and shot a phenomenal bull, by the way, I might add. So it's a pretty, for someone with no points, it's a pretty awesome state to apply in.
Yeah, I always encourage people to apply in Utah. As far as buying a hunting license to apply, it's relatively inexpensive at $65. The other thing I always encourage non-residents, they often look past the general season deer opportunities in Utah, and those work on a preference point system, which is different than a bonus point system. A preference point system is going to give all the permits to the individuals with the most points, but you can still draw a lot of those general season deer units, with 1 or 2 points, and give yourself an opportunity to come out and have a pretty fun hunt for general season deer every few years. So I always encourage people to apply in Utah. You noted earlier that a non-resident, they can actually apply for any and all species that they're interested in. So, limited entry deer, limited entry elk, antelope, moose, sheep, goat, bison, even general season deer. A resident has to actually pick their species, so they have to either pick limited entry elk, deer, or antelope, and then they can actually pick a once-in-a-lifetime species like moose, sheep, goat, or bison, and then they can also apply for general season deer. But I mean, if you're a non-resident, I think it's a great state to apply in. I mean, the chances of drawing one of those premier units and premier hunts is pretty slim. But like Jay just said, you never know when it might be you. And for $65, plus $10 per species that you apply for me, it's worth it.
Also, Trail, that's a great point. Also, there's also waiting periods. Like I believe I drew in 2016 on the beaver for archery. I didn't harvest, but I am in a waiting period. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I think it's 5 years that I can't even apply in Utah for elk because I drew, whether I was successful or not. That's also an interesting dynamic, and I think it at least makes you think that other people have a better chance to draw if those that have drawn have to wait 5 years.
Yeah, correct. Yep, you got 5 years. You can't even apply. If you've drawn a bull elk tag, it's a little bit less for antelope and buck deer, so you're only a 2-year waiting period for those two limited entry species. I have kind of a funny story. I was actually, when my wife killed that bull this year, we were sitting there and I was working on it, and she was kind of sitting there taking it all in, and she kind of sat back there and she said, "Man, she's like, I never thought hunting could be this enjoyable, this amazing. What a cool experience." And she just said, "I think we should do this again next year." I said,
"You had to break the news to her."
Yeah. I said, I hate to break your heart, but you can't even apply for 5 years. So I don't think she quite knew what she had there. But yeah, kind of a fun experience.
Let's talk about the new change. I hear there's a change with the mentoring program. Can you talk a little bit about that, how it worked?
Yeah, so prior to this year, if you drew a permit, you could actually mentor somebody in your immediate family. So, like for example, if I drew a permit, I could mentor my son, my 12-year-old, and I could have taken him out with me, and I had to been with him at all times, and he could have hunted on my permit. This year, they've actually made some changes to that program that have made it a little more accessible. I can mentor my child now, but it doesn't have to be my permit. For example, his grandpa could draw a permit, and he could hunt on his grandpa's permit, and then I could go with him. And basically, anybody that's over the age of 21 that registers and has been through the Hunter's Ed program and the whole lot can actually mentor youth. So that's kind of a cool change in that program. There's another change. You can actually mentor up to 4 youth. So I could put 4 different youth on my permit. They can't all hunt at the same time, but I could take one out individually, and they could hunt and harvest an animal on my permit. So that's another change for that program. And for me, I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm really excited about it. I've been buying my father-in-law points for a number of years, and we've talked about the ability to be able to maybe give one of my kids, one of his grandkids, a permit and go hunting. And so I'm really looking forward to that opportunity.
Trail, just to clarify, let's say, does it have to be your child, or could you have someone in your church or one of your kids' schools? I mean, could you name them as someone you could mentor also?
Correct. Yeah, it could be anybody. Yep.
Okay. So, and they have to be under 21, or what's what classifies them as someone that can be mentored?
Yeah, they have to be under 17, and they also have to have been through Hunter's Ed, so they have to be, the proper channels to hunt normally. But yeah, as long as they fit that bill, then you could mentor them.
And does that apply to limited entry as well as general season permits?
Yeah, my understanding is that it does. It doesn't specify in the regulations what type of permit. It doesn't say if it's a general season deer or a limited entry permit or even a once-in-a-lifetime permit. So my understanding is that, yeah, in any permit you could actually mentor youth.
No, it's another great way to get kids out in the field. And if you had 4 kids, you could name all 4 of them and maybe flip-flop days, and it would just be a matter of which kid got fortunate when the animal was there and was able to harvest, or, I'm sure that has its own pecking order, but pretty neat to be able to get the youth involved like that.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to it. I'm excited about it. I've got a 12-year-old that just took hunter's ed last year, so it's a program that I'm really looking forward to, being able to utilize and being able to get my kids out in the field more.
And just one thing, let's say your father-in-law draws a permit. You, as the mentor, he doesn't actually have to mentor the child. You could mentor the child on your father-in-law's permit. Is that correct? Or does the father-in-law have to be there?
He does not have to be there at this point. I can actually mentor my child on his permit. And, as long as he's with me, he's good to go. So that's kind of the avenue that I've been working is, buying and applying for my father-in-law. And, this is just a change that kind of came down the pipe. I didn't foresee this, but it's just a change that's definitely going to help. And he's excited about being able to give this opportunity to my kid. And I'm excited to be able to take my kid out on a hunt. So, I don't know when that opportunity will be, maybe this year, maybe next year, but I'm hoping to get my kid out on a limited entry elk hunt. And, the cool thing about it is that, it's not going to impact his points or his chance of drawing a permit in the future. He's not going to have to go on a waiting period or anything like that. He'll just be able to go out and hunt and experience that. So I think, what a cool opportunity to take a kid out hunting.
Absolutely, for sure. Utah has done, well, let's back up. Your background, you used to work actually for the Utah Division of Wildlife, doing a lot of habitat stuff. Can you give a little bit of your background with that position that you had and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for 8 years I was a habitat restoration biologist here in Cedar City, so I covered the southern region, and primarily my job was to help design and build and then go ahead and get the funding and actually implement these habitat restoration projects. Probably 99% of the work that I did when I worked there for the division, and I was there for about 8 years, was pinyon and juniper removal and then sage steppe restoration and quite a bit of fire rehab as well. So I got involved in doing a lot of large-scale seedings and those kinds of things. But that's what my background is. I got really heavily involved with Utah has a cool program called the Utah Watershed Restoration Initiative, which is a really cool program that's been unique to Utah. All the federal agencies, the BLM, the Forest Service, NRCS, and even some private entities, and then also the state, a lot of the conservation permit dollars that are raised feed into this initiative. And what was cool about it is that it gave us the opportunity to design and implement large-scale projects. So instead of being able to do, maybe 200 acres of, chaining on a state project, we were able to work across boundary lines, and that 200 acres went to 800 or 1,500 acres. So we were able to treat a lot of country. I think when I worked there for the division, I want to say, I think we almost did close to 100,000 acres in the time that I was there. So it was a really cool opportunity to be able to work with habitat and do good things for wildlife and actually see. It's been really neat to actually see a lot of the benefits of those habitat projects come to fruition in the last couple of years. It's been a neat opportunity.
Where would most of the money for those projects come from?
I would say a lot of it is federally funded, so federal dollars. Some of it's Pittman Robertson, obviously, from the sale of hunting equipment or shooting equipment. A good chunk of it actually comes through the conservation permit program that the state of Utah has. So we just finished up a week or two ago the Hunt Expo up there where they auction off a bunch of the permits. A lot of that money goes back into the ground for those habitat restoration projects. So it's just basically, pooled money from the state, money from conservation groups, money from federal landowners that want to see some things done on their property that is adjacent to federal land. So it's basically a pooled resource.
Utah, I mean, in my mind, Utah's kind of setting the bar for habitat restoration, and it's, no coincidence in my mind that the animals, the trophy quality, and just the condition of Utah's herds have been thriving because of a lot of the quality work that's been done by a lot of different groups, as well as the Hunt Expo and getting that money raised and a bunch of the different organizations. Would you agree that Utah is kind of at the forefront of an overall scale of restoration and doing good projects for the wildlife?
Absolutely. They got into it in the early 2000s with this initiative, and they've done over 1 million acres. They put a lot of money into the ground. We're one of the states here in the West that our mule deer population is actually growing. The trophy potential, you can definitely see that being impacted. If you look at the Paunsaugunt unit, which I was involved in doing lots and lots of projects over there, if you look at the trophy potential and the number of big bucks that are coming off that unit in recent years, to me, there's a direct tie between those habitat restoration projects and the trophy potential of those bucks on that unit. It was a really cool, program to be a part of, and like I said, it's been really, really neat to kind of see those projects mature and grow and see our herds start to grow with them and see the quality increase with those projects. So it's been really neat. I got to look at a project last year that I did over there on the Pavant, and I got to look at some of the flight data when they flew that unit for elk, and there was 26 6 points in one little project that I'd done. It's about the size of, it's about 500 acres. That was pretty dang cool to see that much utilization in that area. So,
for sure. So, when you left the Department of Wildlife, you've been working with Go Hunt. What actually is your role, and what, on a day-to-day basis, what do you do at Go Hunt?
Yes, I used to freelance write for them when I was working for the division. I always liked to write, and I was always really big into hunting, and I was, really interested into the research side of things. So I was kind of the geek that was going through all the state data and the draw odds and looking at bull to cow ratios and those kinds of things and trying to tease out some spots to find a little hidden gem. But I came on with Go Hunt, and I think my official title here is I am the research manager, and then also I guess you'd say the resident gear guy. So
the gear geek?
Yeah, the gear geek. Yeah.
I don't know who has the title, who holds the title the best, you or Brady over there, because you're both gear geeks.
I'm probably more geeky than Brady. Brady's probably
that is saying a lot. I don't know if people don't know what that means, but that is saying a lot right there.
Brady might be the cooler of the two of us. I'm just kind of geeky, I guess. But yeah,
great.
A lot of the go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of the equipment that we carry in the store is kind of some stuff that that I like and use, and so that's kind of part of my role, is I get to pick a lot of the gear that we carry in the store, work with the rest of the guys on the team as well, but a lot of that comes from me, and then a lot of the questions. So if you're an insider or anybody that wants to purchase some gear from the store and you want to talk to somebody on the phone, I'm the guy that you're going to get on the phone and get to talk to you. So if you're looking for a new backpack, I'm the guy that can basically talk you through our options and what might work best for you. And then on the research side of things, for the last, I would say, month and a half, 2 months, I've been just completely buried in working on application strategy articles. So I work with Brady hand in hand on those. I do a lot of the research and a lot of the writing, and Brady gets to do a lot of the creative graphs and putting a lot of the data into those to making them look cool and probably look a whole lot better than when I hand them to him. I know that. He
dolls it up?
Yeah, he definitely makes it look better. When I send it to him, I always have a little twinge, like, oh man, I'm glad that my part's done and he has to deal with that.
Yeah, I hear you, and he does such a great job. for those listening, a lot of people know that Go Hunt and Go Hunt Insider is the title sponsor of my podcast, and I might as well say right now, that the Insider, is kind of revolutionizing how people are, studying and trying to keep up on these draws and harvest statistics, and kind of geek out on all the different Western states, and trying to figure out how to get the best hunts and find those places maybe that are under the radar and what have you. And you guys do such a good job at not only having incredible draw odds that are super accurate, but then I've got the application strategy pulled up right now on my computer. I'm an Insider member, and obviously you had a huge hand in this strategy article, and you guys do a phenomenal job breaking it all down. As I look here, and there's lots of cool charts and graphs and what have you. Want to encourage anybody out there listening, if you're not a Go Hunt Insider member, you can go to gohunt.com/insider and follow the prompts to sign up. When you do so, use the JScott promo code, and you're going to get a $50 gift card to the Go Hunt Gear Shop. Trail, talk a little bit about the recent addition of the Go Hunt Gear Shop, and kind of how that works as getting that $50 credit for these guys that use the JScott promo code. When they get that credit, I had someone on Instagram the other day say that he got two, I believe, like Yeti mugs of some sort with a Go Hunt logo on them, and that's what he chose to use his $50 for. But talk a little bit about the gear shop. You've got a hand in all of the products there, and give a little overview there.
Yeah, so we opened up a gear shop in June. Basically wanted to do that to just give our insiders another option, an incentive to buy something, and basically a one-stop shop. So if you're an insider, you also have access. And again, you don't have to be an insider to purchase things from the store, but if you are an insider, we have this built-in point system into the store, which you kind of noted. If you sign up to be an insider, you're going to get 50 points. 1 point is equal to $1, and it's just straightforward. You can use that to buy anything in the gear shop that you want to. Our gear shop is a little bit different. We didn't want to take a big box store approach to a gear shop. We didn't want to carry 30 different brands. We basically wanted to really tailor it and carry brands that we really use and believe in. So we might carry 4 or 5 brands of each individual item. And they are things that we really like, things that we field test, things that we use, and things that we really believe in. And so our gear shop is really kind of tailored to what we believe in and what we really like in a gear shop. So that's how the gear shop works. It's a pretty cool incentive to be an insider, because you're going to get points back on any purchase that you make. Say example, you want to buy a new backpack, and that backpack's $525. It's going to be that price no matter where you buy that backpack from anywhere. We're actually going to give you $55 back in points that you can use to turn around and buy anything else in the store that you might be interested in, like the water bladder or, hip belt pockets or any kind of accessory that you might want for that pack. So it's just a really cool system that works well for our insiders, gives them some incentive to shop with us, and it also gives us the ability to kind of reward our insiders for being part of what we got going on.
So in other words, as you spend money, you're getting money back. So
Correct.
when you really add it all up at the end of the year, as you're buying stuff through the Go Hunt Gear Shop, you're actually getting credit back, in essence, points back, and that allows you to then use that towards a purchase of something else. And if you look at it year over year, you end up saving a bunch of money, because everything you buy, you get money back, correct? Or points, credit back.
Yep. Yeah, everything that you buy, you're going to get points back, and like I said, 1 point equal to $1. So, if you buy a new tent with us, I'm looking at one right now, the Big Agnes Fly Creek UL2, $349. That's going to be the cost of that tent, no matter where you buy it, because that's how MAP pricing works. But we're actually going to give you $35 back that you can turn around and buy anything else that you might need. So, yeah, just just a cool system to help our insiders and to kind of reward our insiders for being members.
Pretty cool, pretty cool. Let's dive right into let's start with Utah deer, and probably have you explain the limited entry opportunities, and then talk a little bit about the general seasons, and then I kind of want to just go just kind of not rush through, but just name a unit and have you tell me what you think about it, and we'll just kind of go through some of the units, and we'll kind of just go from one to the other to the next.
Okay. So you have limited entry deer, and then you've got general season deer. Another question I pretty frequently get asked is, what's the difference between a premium limited entry deer? Well, there's a couple of units that are premium limited entry, and that's going to be the Henry Mountains and the Paunsaugunt. And those two units, the state of Utah manages for a better buck to doe ratio, and they actually do age class estimates for that herd and for their harvest. So they manage those two for an older age class of buck. Those are the two best units in the state for us. Those are the two that you're always going to see a handful of really big bucks every year. Then you got limited entry units, places like the Oak Creek, the Vernon, the Brook Cliffs, and there's a couple others, San Juan Elk Ridge, and there's a few others, but those are your limited entry deer units. And then you've got general season deer. There's 30 general season deer units. Those general season units are managed for a desired buck to doe ratio. They're not managed for big bucks. They're not managed for an age class by any means. They're basically designed to give opportunity to general, people to hunt. They're general season units. They're not available over the counter. You still have to draw those, but like I said earlier, those are ones that work on a preference point system, where the limited entry to premium limited entry work on a bonus point system.
Okay, let's start with Henry's Mountains. Obviously, you said it was one of the premium units. In your mind, is it hands down better than the Paunsaugunt? And talk a little bit about the trend that you see going on in the Henrys. Is it maintaining? Is it getting better and better, or is it declining?
I would make the argument that the Paunsaugunt has probably caught it and maybe even exceeded it as far as a trophy unit. They're still going to kill some big bucks on the Henrys every year, just by the nature of that unit and the way they manage it. I would suggest on the last couple of years, the number of bucks that I've seen come off of the Paunsaugunt, I would say right now it's probably beaten the Henrys as far as overall trophy potential, and that might be blasphemous. There's probably somebody throwing something at the radio if they're listening to it right now. But I would make that argument. I mean, they absolutely just slayed some giant deer off the Paunsaugunt this year, and I think they will again this next year. So I would make the argument that if it hasn't passed it, it's knocking on the door. The Henrys for a long time has kind of been our gem. It's been our go-to for big bucks, and it still is a great unit for big bucks. I just think that right now that Paunsaugunt is awfully good.
Okay, let's talk about the Paunsaugunt. And in your mind, you have some experience there. You don't live very far from there. What has made the Paunsaugunt what it is? I mean, it seems like it was the premier unit in Utah, and then it had years where it was struggling, and then it's back to prominence now. What has caused it to be like that?
I think it's what we talked about earlier. I think it's habitat, and I think we're saving more deer. There's two things that I could point to specifically that are helping that herd. The first one is the habitat restoration work that's going on over there. It's really interesting to me. People used to bow hunt that Paunsaugunt unit up on top. They'd hunt there, all around the top of like Tropic Reservoir and all that country, from Nephi pasture, everything up on the top elevations of that unit. And a lot of those big bucks now that they're killing on the bow hunt are actually they're killing down on those middle elevations where a lot of those habitat restoration projects have been occurring. And, those guys are finding and hunting those bucks down there because that's where the groceries are and that's where the deer are. So, for me, it seems like a pretty tight correlation between improved habitat and, antler development. I think some of those trophy bucks are definitely benefiting from the good feed that's a product of those habitat restoration projects. The other thing I think is helping that herd is they actually fenced, and they high fenced about 18 miles of the highway there that runs out of Kanab east towards Lake Powell, which is a major migration route for those deer. Those deer come off the Paunsaugunt, they migrate to the south, and they actually end up out there on Buckskin Mountain and move towards Arizona. They fenced a bunch of that. They put in a bunch of underpasses. The first couple of years was a bit of a disaster. Those deer didn't quite know how to process that. They didn't know where to go, and they would kind of stack up against the fence. In the last few years, they figured that out, and they're passing freely. But they figure that's maybe saving close to 500 deer a year just on that stretch of highway. So anytime you're saving that many deer, and you're also, putting, like I said, putting good feed and good habitat back on a unit, I definitely think it's helping that unit.
For sure. Do you know anything about the up there at the expo, Zinke? Interior Secretary Zinke was up there and had just signed a bill of some sort that is working with migration corridors and what have you. Do you know much about that and what kind of impact that is going to have in the western U.S. for our herds?
I don't know exactly, the ins and outs of the order that he signed, and I haven't had enough time to really dive into it to learn the details of it. I know that in the last few years, there's been doing a lot of research, collar studies. I don't know if there was a guy out of Wyoming that did a film that talked about the mule deer migration, and then they did a bunch of stuff on antelope where they collared antelope and watched and monitored these migrations. And there's definitely more focus right now on those types of things. I mean, they were finding up there that these mule deer were, migrating hundreds of miles, out into their winter range. And I think we're kind of starting to see the impact that we've had by putting in roads and, energy development and those kinds of things to some of our herds. And I definitely think there's been more focus on that. We've definitely learned a whole lot more in the last few years. So I'm hoping, I hope it entails more research and then, maybe at least kind of defining those corridors and doing things to help those herds move freely between, summer range and winter range.
For sure. So we've got the Henrys and the Paunsaugunt, the two best units for limited entry deer, and then we've got a handful of other units. In order of quality, is there any others that come close, or is it like the next tier down, and what would a couple of those better units be in your mind?
Yeah, I would say it's a next tier down. There's a few units that you got the potential to kill a big buck on. I would say maybe that Fillmore Oak Creek unit, it will pretty regularly produce a 200-inch plus buck. I know a couple of years ago there was a couple brothers that killed two bucks that were over 220. That unit can definitely kick out a big buck, but probably not in the number that a unit like the Paunsaugunt or the Henrys can. The other one I would say is pretty interesting is that San Juan to Elk Ridge. It's a little bit similar, I would say, to the Oak Creek. There's a few big bucks, just not a ton of them. And then there's a few units like the Vernon or the Book Cliffs, maybe even that LaSalle Dolores Triangle unit, where the quality is not going to be quite there. I mean, you're basically hunting, maybe a 160 to 180 type of buck if you're lucky, but you're going to have a fun hunt. You're going to have an opportunity to see a lot of deer, see a lot of nice bucks, but just not those true giants.
Gotcha. And then we move into the general season, which explain how that works for residents and non-residents. And, I didn't know until 2016 when my buddy Tony's like, yeah, you idiot, you've been applying for limited entry deer, but you have not been applying for general season deer. And I'm like, no, I didn't know you could do both. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you could apply for both general season deer and limited entry deer. There's 30 general season deer units. There's different hunts that go on. You've got the archery hunt, a muzzleloader hunt, and actually new for this year, they actually split some of those units, and they're going to have an early rifle hunt, which is going to be mid-October, and then they're going to have a late rifle hunt, which is the more traditional rifle hunt in Utah, which is the last week there in October. But basically, those units are opportunity type of hunts. They're managed for buck to doe ratios in that 15 to 21 range, so definitely not not managed for trophy potential, but every year some of the biggest bucks in the state come out of those general season units.
And then there's also the name of it's escaping me, but for residents you can actually it's actually for residents and non-residents. What's it called when you can hunt 3 years in one particular unit?
Yeah, Utah has what they call the dedicated hunter program. You have to draw into it just like you would for a general season deer tag. It's kind of a cool program. You've got to do some service hours, so up to 32 service hours. You pay a little bit higher price, but in exchange for that, you're actually going to get a chance to hunt all three, the muzzleloader, the archery, and the rifle hunts. And you can harvest 2 deer in 3 years. And I think, man, if you're a resident or if you live close enough that you can, do your service hours, or you could actually pay for your service hours as a non-resident, I think it's a really cool program. It's the best opportunity that anybody has to kill a big buck on a general season unit for sure.
Don't you think that's somewhat kind of not mainstream and not everybody knows about that? And like you said, if you were one of these guys that had quite a bit of time, to put into archery, the muzzleloader, the rifle, you could really get to know a unit really well. You could probably find a buck and, watch them over a period of time. A real opportunity to probably get a lot of hunting in and really, specifically, work over a unit pretty good. Would you agree? Yeah,
absolutely. It's my favorite program. I think it's really, really a good opportunity to find and hunt a buck. All my biggest bucks have come off of general season units, and it's because I've had the ability to scout all summer and, hunt through a bow hunt. And typically I can't get it done on the bow hunt, it seems, on a big buck. But that first day of the muzzleloader hunt, I can make a run at those bucks where they're still in their summer range, and I can get it done with the muzzleloader. So if it is a little bit under the radar, but if you have the means to either pay for your service hours or do your service hours, and then you've got the time to come out and bow hunt, and maybe muzzleloader and even rifle hunt if you got the time, I think it's an awesome opportunity to kill a big buck on a general season unit.
These late muzzleloader hunts in the general season units, talk about the timing. The date typically is October 31st through November 8th, I believe. And obviously that's, right there on the cusp of, getting some deer rutting and what have you. Talk about those muzzleloader hunts and the timing of that.
Yeah, so they did that a few years ago, and I think they did that to try to kind of work through some of the people in the system with a lot of, bonus points, try to work through some of those applicants. So they take place on general season units, but they are a limited entry unit. So if you apply for one of those, you will burn your limited entry bonus points if you take that hunt and go hunting. And, you're spot on, October 31st to November 8th this year. For me, I think it's a pretty good hunt if you don't have a ton of points that you're going to burn on it. I personally probably wouldn't burn a stack of points on those hunts just based on the fact that, they take place just days after the general season rifle hunt ends. and they end November 8th. Really, it's a little bit too early for a good rut. We typically don't get into that good rut until maybe middle of November to the end of November and even early part of December. So it's not like a great rut hunt. They do kill some big bucks every year. Every once in a while, there'll be a buck that will slip out and get feeling a little bit ruddy, and somebody will pick him off with that late muzzleloader tag. But for the most part, I would say it's a good hunt. If you've got a few points, I personally wouldn't burn a bunch of them on. I just don't think it's a quality enough hunt to burn a lot of points on.
When you say a few, would you burn 5 or 6 points, or would you say, don't burn 8 or 9 points? What's kind of the cutoff for you?
I'd have to jump in and kind of look where the breakdown is for some of those other units. I would say I probably wouldn't burn anything like in that 10-point range. Less than that, I would say, yeah, it's probably worth it if you've got some time to really scout and put some effort into it. You get above that many points, I would probably be looking at more of maybe an archery hunt like on the Book Cliffs or something like that, which would be a more fun hunt. You're definitely going to see a lot more deer. I just wouldn't. I see guys. I look through the points, and I'm seeing guys burning 15, 16, 17 points on these general season late muzzleloader hunts, and I don't know. I wouldn't make that gamble unless I had some real time to put into it.
Because in essence, they're following up, piles of people that are hunting the general rifle seasons, and it's just a couple days later, and there's really nothing that's changed. Like you said, it does get kind of close to the rut, and maybe if you had some weather or something, maybe some bucks getting ready, but it's definitely not a rut hunt. But there's enough of an intrigue there that's like, man, it's getting close to those dates. I think it suckers a lot of people into it.
Yeah. I think if that hunt were, another week or 2 weeks later, man, it'd be right in the wheelhouse, and I would definitely, I'd say look at it hard and go for it. But with those dates ending on the 8th, it's really not quite, late enough to have much of a rut.
You being you're an archery junkie. You like to hunt with anything, but you're an archery junkie. Do you feel like the general season archery hunts are probably the best bet for the guy that has tons of time and can really, take, most of the hunt off and have a bunch of time scouting in the summer? Do you think that's the best probably chance to kill the biggest buck?
Actually, on the contrary, I would say the muzzleloader is the best hunt to kill a big buck. Utah changed their laws a couple of years ago where you can use a magnified scope on a muzzleloader, which helps a little bit. You can also shoot a modern muzzleloader with an inline muzzleloader. And I've hunted a lot of deer, a lot of big deer that I wanted to kill with a bow that I just could not make it happen with a bow, that I've turned around and shot on the first day of the muzzleloader hunt. And I've had that dedicated hunter deer tag. So I would actually say if your objective was to kill a nice buck, a big buck on a general season unit, I would put a lot of time into scouting during the summer, during the archery hunt, and I would probably try to plan to hunt that muzzleloader hunt because I think that's your best bet of harvesting a big buck on a general season unit.
If you had to pick, say, the top 4 or 5 general season units, and you don't even have to do them in order, but what would you say the top 4 or 5, year over year, the best units are for general season deer?
I would say the Pine Valley got a lot of deer. Every year they're going to kill, some 200-inch bucks, maybe a couple, and there's going to be a handful in that 170 to 190 range. I would say the Beaver is another unit that's always going to turn out some big bucks on a general season unit. It's just got a good combination of a good amount of summer range. They had a big fire there a few years ago. It's had tons and tons of habitat work on the winter range, so that unit's always going to turn out some big bucks. Surprisingly, I would say the Panguitch Lake, which is just right here out my back door in Cedar City, a good deer population. We had an 80,000 acre fire there this year, so that's going to kind of impact things. I think this first year it might be a little bit slow. Maybe we lost some recruitment this year to that fire, but I think with the productivity that fire is going to generate in the next 2 to 3 years. That unit's going to be really productive. I know of 2 bucks that came off that unit on the muzzleloader hunt this year that were north of 200, and quite a few in that 180 range. Let's see, so that's 3. 4, I would say maybe the Southwest Desert. Not as many deer, but a lot of habitat work and enough deer that you can have a good hunt and, the potential for just a giant out there. Because there's so much country and so much pinyon and juniper and sage that you just never know what's going to turn up.
Sounds good. Let's jump over to, let's switch gears and jump over to sheep and talk about the sheep opportunities in Utah for both, non-residents and residents.
Yeah, so non-residents, they're going to have 3 desert units that they could apply for. They're each going to have 1 permit apiece, and then 3, Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep units that they can apply for with 1 permit apiece. For the desert sheep, you're going to have that San Rafael South unit. You're going to have the Caparowitz East. For a non-resident, they can actually hunt any of those Caparowitz units, which is nice for a non-resident that draws that permit. And then you're going to have the Zion unit. Of those, I would say the Zion is definitely the best unit. It offers the best hunt. You're going to see more sheep. The potential for a bigger sheep is better in the Zion. Next to that, I would say that Caparowitz East is your next best bet, and then that San Rafael South. We talked earlier, again, those are going to be 1 permit for each one of those hunts, and it's going to be randomly allocated, so you just never know who's going to draw that permit. I mean, it literally could be somebody with 0 points, it could be somebody with 1. You just
so for those people out there listening that are, I never draw anything, and you say, well, do you put in? No. What you're telling them right now, that's your way of saying, listen, dude, you don't have any points, but you have just as good a chance to draw one of those 3 units as anybody, right?
Maybe not just as good, because they do have a bonus point system. So statistically, the guy with 20 points, his name is going to go on the hat that many times, but you've definitely got a chance. Okay.
Good point.
Yeah. So maybe not as good, but for $10, I mean, you might as well throw your name in the hat, right?
Absolutely. What about for residents in Utah as far as sheep? What would stand out as the units to be looking at?
So for residents, the units that are going to be good are similar to the units that are for non-residents that are good. You're talking the Zion. That's where the trophy potential is going to be the best. The 2 Caparowitz units, so Caparowitz West, Caparowitz East, both of those units are good numbers of sheep. The Pine Valley is actually pretty good, right down there in the southern end of the state. So that would probably be the top 4 for residents. Some of those units in the central portion of the state have struggled a little bit, still offer a decent hunt, but just probably not the hunts that those other 4 offer.
What about Rockies?
For Rockies, the Book Cliffs are good. So the Book Cliffs South, the 9 miles, pretty dang good. And if you're looking for a fun hunt with a lot of sheep, those Newfoundland Mountains are good. And that's going to be...
Those are actually California, right? California Bighorns?
Yep, they are California. Yeah,
Okay.
Utah doesn't make a distinction between the 2. They still list them as the same when you apply. Those units are listed under the Rocky Mountain, but they are California Bighorn for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, those are going to be your best units for both of those species. Really, I mean, any one of them can offer a good hunt. We typically don't kill a lot of book rams here in Utah, either for Rockies or desert sheep. So our trophy potential, you're mostly going to be in that 150 to 170 class range. It's mostly just a fun hunt, and they definitely manage for 100% harvest success to give you long season dates, so plenty of time to hunt, and just basically a fun hunt for a nice sheep.
Let's talk about Rocky Mountain goat in Utah.
Yeah, so there's some great units for Rocky Mountain goat, and I'm hoping to finally capitalize. I'm sitting on 15 points this year, so I'm hoping this is finally my year for goat. As far as the best units in the state, you're probably talking about the Beaver, which is down here in southern Utah. That's historically been one of the best units for us. Good number of goats. Trophy potential is quite good. After that, the unit there in northern Utah, you've got the Uintas, so you've got several units there. In the Uinta range, you've got Uintas West, you've got Camas Uintas. You've also got Uintas Central, which has got a good population. You've got Uintas East, which has a smaller population, and you have another unit called Leidy Peak. There tends to be more goats towards the western portion of those units in the Uintas. Trophy potential is about the same through all of those, but a fun hunt if you're looking for like a true mountain goat style hunt where you're going to have to backpack and get into some of that really clippy, nasty terrain. The Uintas is probably the place to do it. Right there along the Wasatch Front, they've got 3 different units. They actually took the former unit and split it into 3 smaller subunits. And all the way there in northern Utah, you've got Willard Peak, which has great access, a good number of goats, and actually has really, really good trophy potential. So, plenty of opportunity for mountain goats. It's a great state to hunt mountain goats, and I would definitely encourage residents and non-residents to look at goats and apply.
About Shiras moose, are you getting close on your Shiras moose, or have you already got your Shiras moose in Utah?
I'm not. I jumped into applying for mountain goats. I took a look at the points. It's been like 15, 16 years ago, and started looking and seeing the number of individuals in the pool that are applying for Shiras moose, and I just decided to go a different direction. In fact,
that's right. As a Utah resident, you can apply for both, like non-residents can, right?
No, I can't. I have to pick mine. So I picked mountain goat. Yeah, and glad that I did. I think over the half of the Utah residents that have bonus points for a once in a lifetime species have them in for moose. So the chances of drawing a moose tag as a resident in Utah are really, really tough. But our moose population is actually kind of starting to rebound. We had a bit of a crash maybe 5 to 6 years ago. It seemed like populations were tanking, and it seems like, they're definitely not like they were back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We definitely don't have as many permits as we did then, but we're doing better, and we're starting to see a few more moose permits and a few more opportunities. When you're talking moose as far as trophy potential, you're probably looking at like the Wasatch, which has a good number, that Wasatch Central Mountains unit that has a good number of moose and some nice bulls. The South Slope Yellowstone is pretty good and also has a good number of nice bulls. And then I would actually say I was looking this year at the age class data that just came back, and that Cache unit is actually on the rise and might be a sleeper for a nice bull moose.
Trail, that leads us to the bison. What's the story with the bison in Utah as far as quality, and what kind of hunts are these? Are they pretty awesome hunts, or have you been on any of these bison hunts?
I haven't been on a bison hunt. I've seen a lot of them. We have 3 units. We've got the Henry Mountains, which is the unit we've had forever, and one of the most genetically pure bison herds that still exists. The other unit that we have is the Book Cliffs, which has done extremely, extremely well. Those bulls and those bison were transplanted onto that unit and have done really, really well. I was talking to the biologist, who's a friend of mine out of that northeast part of the state, and he was saying that those Book Cliffs unit will actually be hitting objective probably within the next 2 to 3 years. And they kill, some great bulls out of both of those units. And then we also have a kind of unique opportunity for a hunt there on Antelope Island, where it's probably it's not a canned hunt by any means. It's pretty dang close, but it's an island. You go out there, and if you draw that permit, you're pretty well guaranteed to kill a nice bull. So those are the opportunities for bison. I would say, if you're just kind of starting, if you're a resident, you're just starting and you're looking at applying for a once-in-a-lifetime species and you're looking for better odds, I would encourage you to take a good hard look at bison. The opportunities there are pretty good. The populations are doing phenomenal. You've got the chance to either put in for an any bison permit, which would give you the chance to hunt a bull or a cow, or they have actually cow-only permits that are relatively, I mean, they're not easy to draw, but they're a whole lot better than a lot of our once-in-a-lifetime species. So definitely some opportunities there. And then, like I said, if you're a non-resident and you have any interest at all in applying and hunting bison, I would definitely encourage you to apply for a bison hunt in Utah.
Good stuff. I think we've got elk, which I'm sure a lot of people listening want to hear what you have to say about elk. Before we do that, I want to take just a second and talk a little bit about where you grew up and where, you kind of cut your teeth hunting. What part of Utah? Talk a little bit about your background there.
Yeah. I actually grew up right there in the heart of some of the best elk country that we have to offer, maybe anywhere, to be honest. You might pick a bone with me there about, for Arizona. You probably have, you probably say that Arizona is the best for elk country, and you might be right. But for Utah, I grew up right there between the Beaver, Mount Dutton, the Boulder, and even the Monroe was right there. So I grew up in a little town called Antimony. My dad was a park manager there at Otter Creek State Park, which is a reservoir there, good fishing. So I grew up basically right there in the heart of all that good elk country. Spent a lot of time out just looking, and I got into high school and then even later into college. I did a lot of shed hunting. I remember using all my spring breaks when I was going to college to come home and hunt shed. So I got to know a lot of that country, and I love that country, and there's some great bulls through those 4 units.
What would you say growing up there and then watching the quality, back in, what would it be, say like 04, 05? You can correct me on the exact dates, but where Utah just was killing, giant bulls in every unit. And then where we're at now with the quality in Utah, for one, what caused that spike? And then obviously I would think they upped the amount of tags and it brought it back down. But talk about being able to witness, Utah on the rise, and then seeing it where, they were killing the biggest bulls in the country, hands down.
Yeah. And
then where we're at now and the health of the herd overall.
Yes, I would say I drew what they called an AR301 tag, which was an archery opportunity in 2002. And that gave me the opportunity I could hunt the Beaver, the Dutton. It might have been another unit. I can't remember exactly. It might have been the fish. I can't remember exactly. But there was a couple of units that you could hunt, and you could draw that about every 3 to 4 years, and you could put in for it. And I killed about a 330 bull the first year I applied for that and drew it in 2002. And it seemed like not the next year, but the year after. So 2004, they went to a much more limited strategy. So they cut those units all into their own hunts and their own, own units. So they all had, their own archery hunt, their own muzzleloader hunt, their own early rifle hunt. And they got pretty restrictive with the tags. And I would say from about the years of, 05 to, maybe 2010, man, they were just killing some absolute just giants. I remember my dad drew a late Dutton tag in 2007, and I remember the first day of his hunt, we looked at 26 six-point bulls in one drainage, and right there before dark, there was a nice 360 class bull, and I begged and pleaded with him to shoot it, and it was down in a hole, and he was like, I don't know how we're going to get it out of there, I'm going to pass on it, but we ended up hunting the rest of his hunt, and man, we just saw some absolute giants. We ended up seeing one bull that I know was north of 400 and just couldn't get back on him again. So yeah, I think that restriction in permits, it really cut back the number of tags and allowed a lot of bulls to mature and get some age to them, and we did. We killed a lot of big bulls there for a number of years. I would say since then, maybe the last 4 to 5 years, we've been a lot more lenient. We've given a lot more permits. And we're kind of actually on the downswing of that. So we've killed, a lot less true giants than we did during that heyday. It's good that we're giving more people the opportunity to go hunting, but we're definitely not killing the type of bulls that we were during, prime time back there in 07, 08. I would
Do you
say,
think that will ever change? Will they ever revert back and give less permits, or do you think the trend is that, we are where we're at? And do you think that there'll ever be a change, or do you think they would ever consider looking at like 2 units and just making them super limited and just growing some hogs and killing some giants, or do you think they're going to kind of keep spreading the opportunity out?
Utah's an interesting state. So how they manage that is they manage it on an age class. So they divide the different limited entry units into an age class, and what they try to do is when somebody harvests a bull, they send in the teeth from that bull, and they do an age on those teeth of that bull, and they try to manage a unit based on an average of all the bulls that come in for a desired age class. And those can kind of have some ebbs and flows. If you're an insider and you looked at this last app strategy article I did a breakdown of what the age class objectives were for each unit, as well as what if they're exceeding them or if they're below objectives. So kind of what the trends are. I can't say that they will never. It would never go back to the way it was, and really restricting those tags, and we might see some of those real, phenomenal hunts again. The way Utah manages, an idea can come out of left field from anywhere in that process, and they can take that and run with it, and we could see some units that are really, strictly managed, and the number of bits reduced, and we could see some giant bulls again. I don't foresee that. I would say right now we're kind of just on status quo. They look at that data every year that comes in, and they average it out for 3 years, and they kind of make their tag allotments. And I would say for the most part, the last 5 years or so, they've been pretty consistent as far as what they're managing for, and the number of permits and the types of bulls that we're seeing come back in after every hunt.
If you had to take, let's say, 3 units in Utah, well, let's back up. If you looked at all the units in Utah and you took the 2 biggest bulls in each unit, in your opinion, which unit would have those 2 biggest bulls?
The Plateau boulder, and probably the San Juan would be the 2 that seem to always produce a handful of 400-inch bulls. After that, you're probably talking, maybe the Fillmore Pavant, and then probably the Beaver.
What is it that makes the boulder, the San Juan for a long time, was Utah's, obviously arguable. Everybody's got a different opinion, but a majority opinion that the San Juan was the best unit. The boulder, is it just because the boulder is so thick and it just allows some of those bulls to get old? Is that what the boulder has going for it? And in the fact that, hunter success might not be as good because of how thick and, rough that mountain is?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Of course, they manage that unit for an older age class, so the objective for that unit is 7.5 to an 8-year-old bull. And then I think you're right. I think that the top end of that unit, the plateau portion of that, is pretty heavily timbered. It's pretty dang thick. And then even late, if those bulls dive off to the east, down into that sands country, it's pretty thick and remote. And I think those bulls are tough to consistently, put glass on and hunt. So I think you're always going to kind of save some bulls. They're going to get some age to them. So I think it's a combination of, being managed for an older age class, and then as well as the type of unit it is, just that it is so thick and there's so much cover, those bulls can really find some refuge.
As far as archery hunts, with the dates, Utah has an interesting date structure. It looks like the 2018 dates are August 18th through September 14th. It's great in the fact that it gives almost a 30-day season. It's tough in the fact that it seems like most archery hunts, it doesn't really happen right until the last week or so. I know it varies from unit to unit. In your mind, what's your thoughts about the archery dates? You know, I know there's some people that love the dates because they can actually pattern a bull and tree stand them and, get them before they make their big move to the rutting grounds. What's your thoughts on the dates?
I don't love the dates. I mean, it's a hard time to hunt a big bull. It's definitely a hard time to keep track of one bull and hunt him consistently because, like you're saying, they're starting that transition from where they've summered into where they're going to load up and start to rut. I had a tag in 2010, an archery tag, and I hunted a bull. I saw him every day I scouted that unit, so 18 days in the summer, and I saw him on opening day, and that was it. That was the last time I ever saw him. So it's dang hard to keep track of a bull, a big bull that you scouted. It's almost a month long, and you might need the whole month, to be honest, to find some success. It can be pretty dang tough. It's really too early to get into any kind of real rut action. So, September 14th, it's going to end. You might just starting to have some bulls starting to bugle and get into a little bit of rut, but it's pretty tough. I would say if you're a diehard bow hunter, certainly the odds are better. I would say really focus on like you're saying, that first part of the hunt, trying to kill a bull that you've patterned all summer. Or I've had pretty good luck hunting, wallows, so areas that first week of September where those bulls are coming in to wallow. They're starting to feel a little bit frisky. They're starting to wallow, but they're not rutting yet. That can be a good spot for ambush.
I want to go through unit by unit and kind of have you talk a little bit about, trophy expectations, what you should expect and what have you. But before we do that, Utah also has a unique opportunity for guys that want to archery hunt in these limited entry units. You can also come and buy over-the-counter spike and cow archery permits. I believe it starts on the same day, that August 18th, and then I think it would end, 7 days? So it'd be, I guess, September 7th, 7 days before the end, which is September 14th. For those out there listening, I get a lot of emails, I want to just go hunt an elk. I just want to get an elk, whether it's a cow or a spike. In your mind, I mean, granted, here I am piling, 50 million people into the state of Utah, so the residents are probably going to be mad at me, but it does create an opportunity where you can go hunt every year with your bow in Utah in these best units. Yes, you have to kill a cow or a spike. You can't kill a, branch antlered bull. But for someone that just wants to be out there and hunting, it's a pretty good opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can buy that permit over the counter. They're unlimited. You can either harvest a spike or a cow with your bow. I know a lot of guys that have been applying for years, and they kind of want to use that as a scouting method, prior to them drawing a big bull permit. So they'll come out and buy a spike permit and go and hunt their unit where they plan on drawing a big bull permit, so that they at least get an idea of the lay of the land and start to get the, kind of a gist of where the elk are on that unit during the bow hunt. So it's a good opportunity. I can say is having, a big bull archery permit. It can be a little bit frustrating when you're being crowded a lot of the times by these guys that are just like they're cows. So I'm not going to say it's definitely something you ought to take into consideration if you do draw an archery limited entry elk permit. You're going to have some company.
Yeah, for sure. When I drew that beaver tag, I definitely saw some over-the-counter spike and cow. It's definitely something that I'm sure is a sore subject for those that draw those limited entry permits. And I'm not saying at all that I think, if you truly wanted my honest opinion, I think it kind of, takes away from that person that's, waited 18 years or whatever to draw that tag, and they got, cow hunters over the counter, unlimited, and spike hunters everywhere. Everybody's got a cow call and a bugle around their neck. But on the flip side of that, for someone that just wants to go hunt every single year, I mean, they need to add Utah to the list. I mean, you could have a over-the-counter Colorado archery elk tag and have an over-the-counter Utah, and you could shoot 2 elk every single year. So for I hear all the time, oh, there's no opportunity out there, there's nowhere to hunt. Well, I mean, that's kind of bogus in my mind, because, I mean, every year you could buy a Colorado and a Utah and you know, kill 2 elk every single year if you got serious about it.
Yeah. I tell guys all the time, I'll have guys that'll call in and say, you know, I haven't drawn a permit anywhere in years. I can't find anywhere to hunt. And, I mean, there are literally so many opportunities to put a permit in your pocket and go hunting, whether, like you're saying, whether it's, you know, Colorado over-the-counter archery elk or, you know, Idaho. Idaho has some great opportunities. And then Utah. I mean, Utah spike or cow, like you're saying, it's, you know, it's not as grandiose as hunting a big bull, but it might give you an avenue to scout your unit that you might potentially draw a big bull tag in and really get to know that unit, and it might pay dividends at that point. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities to go hunting.
For sure. I'm looking at Go Hunt draw odds here, and I'm just going to name the unit. I want you to just spill out a couple sentences about the unit, about the trophy quality, anything that comes to your mind. If it's a unit you don't know much about, feel free to say skip. But kind of interested in, you know, kind of expectation, trophy quality, you know, if someone hunted hard, what they might be able to pull out of it. So let's start here. Obviously, it's in alphabetical. Beaver East.
Great unit. One of the best premier units in the state. Always going to kill a few big bulls. You know, fun archery hunts, got some rough country, and if you're willing to work hard, you can definitely kill a big bull on the beaver.
Quick question about the beaver, kind of middle ground, you know, everyday type of, you know, seeing bulls in the what to what in your mind?
As far as trophy range?
Yeah.
I would say, you know, up to 380 potentially, and maybe even better. You never know. There could definitely be a 400-inch bull on the beaver on any given year. I would say if you're willing to hunt pretty hard, you'd realistically have a pretty good chance at something in that 340 to 350 range. You know, definitely for those early rifle hunters, they're going to have a better crack at it because they're hunting with a gun during the heart of the rut and have a chance to look over a lot of bulls. But I would say, you know, 350 is realistic.
Yep. Brook Cliffs, Little Creek.
Fun hunt. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. That's it's a little hidden gem, just a neat little roadless unit that sits right there in the middle of the Brook Cliffs. You'd have to either backpack or horseback in. Probably one of the best archery rut hunts. So, you know, those bulls don't see nearly as much pressure as a lot of the other units do, so they tend to rut a little bit better in there early. As far as trophy potential goes, you know, maybe something up to 360, 370 class. But just a fun hunt with a lot of elk.
Is that a unit that, you know, potentially could get better bugling just because of the lack of pressure? I mean, talking about the archery hunt? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think that that unit's a little bit more, definitely more removed than most units in the state, and you definitely have to either be in them on foot or horseback, and just given the nature of that, I think those elk see a whole lot less pressure, and they do tend to rut a little bit better. I had a bear tag, spot and stock bear tag in that unit a couple of years ago, and I haven't seen elk rut like that in Utah anywhere.
Brook Cliffs, Bitter Creek South.
You know, big unit, tons of country, really, really neat country. You've got some giant canyons and some pine plateau ridges and a lot of sagebrush. Chance to look over a lot of elk. As far as trophy potential, it's probably not what it was back in the heyday. They definitely killed some big bulls back then. I don't think it's nearly as good as it was. I would say something in that 340 class probably for that unit.
Cache North.
Cache North, unfortunately, just seems to be on the decline. I was looking at the age class data that came back, and like average age was like less than 4, like 3 something. So they're killing a lot of young bulls. There's some remote country in that. You got a lot of wilderness. You got that Mount Naomi wilderness. I would say, if you don't have many points and you don't have expectations of killing a giant bull, that might be a decent opportunity for you. Better draw odds, but definitely a tougher hunt, and definitely not the maturity or the trophy potential of most units in Utah.
Cash south.
Better than the north. More elk, but again, it seems to be struggling a little bit as far as trophy potential goes. I would say it's kind of in that middle ground. If you've got, a decent number of points, it has a little bit better odds than some of the premier units, and it can offer a pretty good hunt. I would say that would be a fun late hunt. So late rifle could be a fun hunt on that unit. When I was going to school up there to Utah State, I spent a lot of time hunting sheds, and always came across a few 340 to 350 type bulls, so I definitely know they exist in that unit. So that late hunt could be a fun one there on the Cache South when those bulls pull off into those canyons that you can glass. But overall, average trophy potential, average draw odds.
Cache Meadowville.
Mostly private. I would say avoid that unit unless you've got outfitter agreement in place that you can hunt that. And if you do, it can be a pretty good hunt, but otherwise I would say avoid it.
Central Mountains Nebo.
Pretty good hunt. A lot of elk, some steep country, some remote country. Trophy potential, I would put it right there in the 340 to maybe 350 class for, the top 5 or 10% of the guys that hunt that. Most guys are going to go home with like a 300 to 320 class bull, but there's definitely potential for something a little bit bigger.
Central Mountains Manti.
Manti has our biggest elk herd in the state, so a lot of elk. Opportunity for a big bull, just given the fact that there's so many elk. Really neat country, kind of your classic elk terrain with those grassy meadows and canyons and aspen and pine. I mean, it's a really pretty unit with a lot of elk, fun hunt. I would say that 350 is probably the high mark on that unit. They don't manage that unit for giant bulls. I mean, it's mostly, I want to say 5.5 to 6.5-year-old type of bulls. But definitely, they'll kill a good bull out of that every now and then, so maybe 350-ish as far as trophy potential goes.
I'm looking here at the Insider draw odds, and it looks like on that hunt, it's 13 points is 100% success draw, and 12 points is an 8.3%, and 11 points is a 7.7%. Fillmore Pavant.
Great unit, and I think getting a bit better. Back to those glory days of the Pavant. They haven't killed those giant bulls like they did during those years that we talked about earlier, but it seems to be getting a little bit better. A lot of bulls, and I would say a 380 type of bull is definitely a potential, a possibility there on the Pavant. Fun hunt.
Pavant was always one in the heyday that was always at the top of the list, and it seems like it's kind of fallen back a little bit, and then I'm starting to hear about it again. Is there any one particular thing that happened, or is it just the cycle of the unit?
I think it's just the cycle. I think the permit numbers have stayed, pretty close to what they were. It just seems to be it's having a little bit better bulls lately, and I don't know exactly why that is, Jay. It just seems like they're killing a few better bulls in recent years. It's always been good, but like you said, it's not like it was, in those early 2000s where it was just amazing.
LaSalle.
Another fun hunt, I would say, trophy potential maybe up to 350. A good number of elk, fun hunt, but just, not a premier hunt by any means, but just more of a fun type of hunt.
The Monroe.
Man, when you talk about fun hunts, the Monroe comes to mind just because they have such a good population of elk and a good number of bulls. I would say that trophy potential up there it's not what it was. When they killed the spider bull, obviously that was a giant bull, and there for a couple of years they had a couple of 400-inch bulls that were hauling that unit home. It's definitely not that type of unit. I would say up to maybe 360, 370 potentially, but just a fun hunt. I mean, great access all over that unit. They typically rut pretty good up there as well, so if you're an archery hunter, it could be a great hunt. It's going to take a pile of points to draw, though.
Mount Dutton, something you don't know anything about.
I don't know anything about the Dutton.
You grew up on that unit, didn't you?
Yeah, that's my favorite. I mean, I spend more days up there than anywhere else, and I love that unit. A lot of people just call it the rock pile because it's mostly just rocks. But, giant fire in the early 2000s that burned a bunch of that country. I would say that unit's getting better. A few years ago, they increased the age class objective, and consequently, they reduced the number of permits for that unit. And I would say in the last 2 years, it's definitely starting to pick up, and I'm seeing a few better bulls. Great late hunt. So if you're looking for a late, that November rifle hunt, I would say take a hard look at that. A lot of that fire burned country that is south and east facing slopes off that east side of that unit, and a lot of elk tend to flock to that side of the unit, and it can be a great late hunt.
I mean, that's a unit that bulls come from other units to winter there, correct?
Yeah. Correct, yeah. It tends to suck some elk from the Monroe and then also the Boulder. They tend to wander over there onto Mount Dutton and spend the winter. So it's a great late hunt. Tough archery hunt, but a phenomenal late hunt.
And there's no sheds there, guys, so look elsewhere for sheds.
There's definitely not any sheds on the Dutton.
Yeah. 9 Mile Anthro.
I don't know a ton about the Anthro. I did talk to a guy last year for a long time who said that hunt can be pretty dang good late. He said that some of the best bulls on that unit they kill on the late hunt, and that those elk come off the top and they end up out in that desert country. And he said, don't worry if there's just no trees at all and it's just straight sagebrush and desert country. He said there's some big bulls that pull off into that type of terrain, so that might be some food for thought if you're looking at a easier to draw late hunt.
North Slope 3 Corners.
That's another one that I don't know a ton about, Jay. I know that it's decent. I mean, pretty average trophy potential, maybe up to 340, 350, but as far as like the ins and outs of that unit, that's one that I don't know a ton about.
Oker Stansbury.
Oker Stansbury is one of those units that's an opportunity type of hunt. Not a lot of trophy potential, not a ton of elk, enough elk that you'll probably find some success if you hunt pretty hard. It's mostly rolling sagebrush and oak and PJ type terrain. I would say, if you're not hung up on trophy potential, it could be a decent option, and, maybe look at maybe 320 to up to maybe 330 type of bull.
Panguitch Lake.
Panguitch Lake is being interesting this year because, like I said, they had that huge fire here this last year. I think there's still a good number of elk up there. I think there's still some great bulls. It could be a great archery hunt, open up some of that country. The Panguitch Lake has always been pretty tough to hunt just because it's so thick up on top. A lot of the bigger bulls were actually killed on the late hunt on that Panguitch Lake, and previously I would say that late hunt has probably been one of the best hunts for the Panguitch Lake. But where we've opened up so much country this year, it's definitely become a whole lot more glassable, and it could be a pretty good early season hunt. As far as trophy potential goes, I'd put it right there in that 350, 340, 350 type of range. They definitely don't manage that unit for as old an age class as some of those other units, those premier units like the Beaver, but it's a pretty good hunt and definitely a chance for a nice bull.
You think that fire could suck some of those bulls from the Beaver over there and maybe they won't come back over?
I think it could. Yeah, I definitely think it could. I mean, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from the south end of that Beaver unit, that Circleville Mountain country. They've always killed a number of really nice bulls off it, and it could definitely pull some bulls into that country for the winter, and they just may never make it back.
The Paunsaugunt for elk.
Paunsaugunt, I would say opportunity type of hunt. So if you don't have very many points and you're not hung up on trophy potential, maybe think about the Ponsegont. It's low country, so mostly pinyon and juniper and sage. There are a few bulls up there in the higher elevation, but not a ton. Not a very big elk population, so they definitely don't manage for a lot of elk on that unit. I know that last year they killed one big bull up there, and he was kind of the one big bull that everybody knew about, and I don't think that there's a ton of recruitment coming back in there as far as nice bulls, so maybe up to 330, I would say. I would not pass a 330 bull in the Ponsegont.
Looking at the Go Hunt Insider, it looks like 11 points is a 100% guarantee for that archery tag. Plateau Fish Lake.
Yeah, the Plateau Fish Lake it's very similar to the Manti. I would put those kind of in the same box with each other. Giant elk herd, second largest elk herd. Definitely one of the biggest in the southern end of the state, and a lot of elk. I would say if you're willing to hunt pretty hard, there is a chance for a 350 type of bull. For the most part, though, guys are going to go home with something in that 320 to maybe 330 class. I have a couple of good friends that live over in that Richfield area, and those guys scouted their tails off this last year and both killed nice bulls on opening day of the archery hunt. And the biggest of the two was in the 340s, which is a great bull. But a fun hunt, lots of elk, beautiful, beautiful terrain, aspen, pine, rolling meadows, just classic elk country.
The Boulder.
And the Boulder's as good as it gets in Utah, I think, hitting the San Juan. We already talked a little bit about it, but you've got some thick terrain up top, a lot of canyon country off of both sides. I would say take a hard look at the late hunt. That's the hunt that my wife drew. I looked over, I want to say 35 bulls in 3 days. We hunted the west side of that unit and had the whole place to ourselves. She killed a great bull. The late hunt doesn't take nearly as many points as it does some of those early hunts, so maybe think about it late. But just a great hunt all around, and the potential for just an absolute monster.
The San Juan.
San Juan, similar to the Boulder, just some giant bulls, and I think we kind of touched on it. But yeah, just one of the top 2 hunts in the state. Worst odds, best hunt.
South Slope, Diamond Mountains.
That's another one I don't know a ton about, Jay. In fact, I probably won't even touch too much on it, other than all I hear about it is the trophy potential is pretty average, so maybe something in that 330 to 340 class, but that's about all I know about that unit.
Southwest Desert.
Interesting unit, the Southwest Desert. It used to be phenomenal as far as big bulls. They killed some giants out there. I would say in the last several years it's been down, and they really haven't killed that many bulls that are even north of 370 that I can think of. I would say it's a fun hunt. You'll see a lot of elk. They're over objective as far as elk go. But as far as trophy potential goes, I would probably put it somewhere in that 340 to maybe 350 range. Tough archery hunt. It's really hot out there in the Southwest Desert early, so plan on sitting water. And from everybody I've ever talked to that's had a permit out there, most of those elk are, they're in bed, 20 minutes after light, and they don't get up until almost dark. So it can be a pretty tough hunt. I would say maybe think about the late hunt out there. A lot of country to look over. It's pretty glassable, so could be a good hunt, but just not the trophy potential that it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Wasatch.
Wasatch, a lot of elk up there on the Wasatch. I would say it's a pretty tough hunt. A lot of those big, steep, nasty, oak-filled canyons. Trophy potential, I'd put maybe in that 330 to 340 class. They will kill a few bigger bulls, but you're going to see a lot of elk. Probably see a lot of people too, because that's where our population base here is in Utah, is along that Wasatch Front in Salt Lake and Utah County. So, plan on seeing a lot of people. But yeah, just kind of a fun hunt, but not necessarily a ton of big bulls.
West Desert Deep Creek.
West Desert Deep Creek's another interesting one. They increased the age class objective of that unit a few years ago and bumped it up into that 7.5 to 8 year old. age class, and they used to kill some big bulls out there too. They haven't really done in recent years. I think with the reduction in permits, you'll probably start to see a few better bulls. That's similar to that West Desert. It's really hot country, low land. You're talking mostly pinyon, juniper, and sagebrush. Reservation out there, and they do have some bulls that tend to cross back and forth between that country and the reservation. So it could be a little bit of a frustration, but it can also be a bit of a benefit if you can get a bull that wanders out of there onto public land. But I would say, right now currently maybe 350 up to maybe 360 potentially. I would probably say it's a better, mid-season like muzzleloader or early rifle hunt than it is an archery hunt. But potential for a big bull, but pretty tough hunt, and possibly going to get better in the future, I would say.
Let's talk a little bit about the muzzleloader hunts for elk are after the archery hunts, and after it goes archery, then the early rifle hunts, and then the muzzleloader hunts. What are a couple of units that you would say are a great muzzleloader hunt? Obviously, the early rifle hunts, I would assume you would say, the Boulder, the San Juan, the Beaver, et cetera. But is there any muzzleloader hunts that jump out at you that, you think would be, the best muzzleloader hunt, or maybe a sleeper that maybe is just, for whatever reason, better on those little bit later dates?
I would say maybe that Book Cliff Little Creek, so that's that roadless unit, and it's not a sleeper per se by any means, but given, we already talked a little bit, but given the nature of that terrain and it's so remote, and you do have to backpack or go on horseback, they do really rut really hard in there, and it would be a fun muzzleloader hunt. I was actually in there during the muzzleloader hunt, and I remember the one night there were probably 16 different bulls on this one face and probably 200 head of cows, and it was just an absolute mixer out there on the muzzleloader hunt. So, that one would be a fun hunt if you were to draw it. I would actually say maybe the other one might jump to me, and I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'd say maybe the Dutton could be a fun one.
Yeah.
I don't want people to be up there on the Dutton, but it could be a really fun hunt.
You're only allowed on the Dutton if your name is Kreitzer.
That's right. But I think that one would be a lot of fun. There's getting to be more elk up there, and I definitely seen an improving quality up there the last few years. So having been up there, I was up there a couple days during the muzzleloader deer hunt this year, which is the same days as that muzzleloader elk hunt, and they were definitely screaming and going bananas, and that was everything from up on top to down in those canyon country, even down into the PJ and the sage. So I'm gonna say those two. I'm gonna say the Dutton and that Little Creek. That's the Little Creek.
Good stuff. And you already said for late hunts, I heard you say look at the Dutton, look at the Boulder. Are there a couple other units out there for late hunts that would maybe be higher on your radar than some of the others?
Yeah, I kind of noted already, but the Penguich Lake has been a pretty good late hunt. They've done a lot of habitat work on that Penguich Lake on the winter range, and there's definitely a lot of bulls that pull into that country. And for several years, the biggest bulls that have come off that unit have come out of that late hunt. So I would always say the Penguich Lake late. A couple others I might throw in there I think are intriguing. Might be like the Fish Lake. It's going to be an easier permit to draw, and they've killed some big bulls on that late hunt on the Fish Lake. They pull out into some of those lower ridges, and definitely they'll kill some nice bulls on that late hunt. I didn't mention, but I probably should, is that Utah has actually got, maybe a handful of units where they've incorporated a mid-season rifle hunt. So it's going to be October, and it's actually going to take place the same time as the over-the-counter spike general season, which can be a little bit frustrating if you draw that permit, but at the same time it takes a whole lot less points to draw that hunt than it does either the early rifle or muzzleloader. and you get a chance to go out and hunt those units. And, I've talked to people, and I mentioned this hunt to them, and I say, hey, maybe you ought to think about this mid-October hunt. And, straight away they're put off by the number of spike hunters that are, liable to be in the field. But at the same time, I would say utilize those guys. I mean, everybody and their pet dog that's out there hunting spikes, if you walk up and say, hey, I've got a big bull tag in my pocket, they're going to point you in the direction where they've seen a big bull. So
yeah, because all the spike hunters see all the big bulls. You just ask them, they're like, oh, I can't find a spike, but I've seen giants everywhere.
Yeah, I've had that happen.
It's true.
And I'm not kidding or being facetious by any means. I've definitely had that happen, and I would say if you don't have a ton of points, think about those mid-October rifle hunts.
Yeah, it's good stuff. That's good stuff. Well, man, we've covered a lot of ground. I really appreciate your time, and really get a lot of value out of this, the strategy articles that you write for Go Hunt, for the Insider, and you can tell you put a lot of effort into it, and your team there, you guys just do a phenomenal job with all this data, and it truly takes, you talk about, geeking out and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, it truly takes someone like yourself that's super detail-oriented to, analyze and pick through and, then offer up those strategy articles like you do, in the application strategies. So just hats off for the great work you guys are doing. And want to ask you, do you know, are there any more shows that you and the Go Hunt crew are going to be at moving forward, or is show season pretty much wound down for you guys?
Yeah, show season's pretty well wrapped for us. That Salt Lake Expo was the last one for the year. We may try to run a couple of guys up to Boise for that backcountry hunters and anglers rendezvous that they're having this summer. And we might go up there and be a part of that. But as far as like actual shows, we're done for the year.
Okay, and then I want to end on obviously being, one of the guys that, you're head of research and such with all these Western states. How do you specifically use the Insider across the Western U.S. here to maybe find some of those hunts that maybe slip through the radar? I mean, give me your take on how you use the data, because it's very comprehensive data. I mean, the charts and the tables and the way it's presented is very, very easy to look at. But how do you specifically search in different states and use the Insider effectively?
Yeah, so, I mean, for our members, hopefully they'll know what I'm talking about. For guys that are kind of interested in what Go Hunt does, we have this platform, Go Hunt Insider, and I would say for me, I jump into that filtering 2.0, which is a filtering system where you can basically pull up a state and a species that you're interested in. So I'll give you an example. So for Colorado coming up, I've been working on that strategy article, but for Colorado, you can pull up mule deer. It'll pull up every mule deer unit in the state of Colorado, and then in the space of about 30 seconds, I can actually filter out for the type of hunt I'm looking for. Or, I can explore options that I may have not even known existed. But typically for me, what I'll do is I'll scroll down and I'll put the number of points I have in. So I've got 1 point this year, and I'll plug that in, and I'll just drag that filter bar over to the 100% odds. And I'll actually see those units filter down to just the hunts or the units that I could draw with my 1 point. So I'll start there because, for me, it's most important to know where can I actually, put a permit in my pocket and go hunting. Where is my opportunity? From there, I might start using the season filter. So I might be able to sort by, sort by archery or muzzleloader, or maybe that third season rifle permit if I've got a window of time there in November that I can go and hunt. And I'll start looking at those units that I can draw for each individual weapon or season. From there, I might drop down to the Harvest Success tab and drag that over and start to explore those opportunities of where Harvest Success has been pretty good. And then for me, last I go up to that trophy potential and start to monkey with it and drag that bar over and see where the trophy potential falls for each one of those units that I've kind of filtered down to. Like I said, first and foremost for me, I'm not as concerned about trophy potential. I'm more concerned about if I can put a tag in my pocket and then, harvest success, and then, if I do my part and I do my work and I scout my tail off, I think I can come up with a pretty good animal. So that's kind of how I use it. I also use these app strategy articles. I go through these with a fine-tooth comb, and I start pulling out data from, like for Wyoming, for example. A lot of people don't know this, but their game and fish agencies, they put out what they call a job completion report. And all the different agencies or different areas, they put out these reports, and there's all kinds of like little hidden gems, like age class of the bulls that were harvested that year. There's all these little cool tidbits, and so I try to incorporate those into these app strategy articles. So, for our members, I would say really dig down and get into the nitty gritty. And I know they're long. I'll just tell you one funny story. I had a guy call me the other day, and I was walking him through an app strategy article, and he kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and finally he's like, holy crap. He's like, who has this much time to put this thing together? And I said, well, it's part of my job, but I would say, man, there's some really, I try to pull some stuff into that I think, those little hidden nuggets that will really be applicable to our users, and really try to give them, some neat little things that they can pull from. So I would say definitely utilize those and utilize that filtering 2.0, and then just start exploring the individual unit profiles to kind of find something that works best for you.
Good stuff, man. You guys do such a great job. And want to remind the listeners, when you sign up for GoHunt.com Insider, if you use the JScott promo code, you're going to get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card. Trail, did you hear about me drawing Dall sheep in Alaska in the Chugach?
I did not hear that. Congratulations.
So I purchased a tag in the Northwest Territories for at Arctic Red River, and was planning Dall sheep hunt on the first hunt there in July, and I went ahead and applied for Alaska, because you're never going to draw 2 Dall sheep hunts or get 2 Dall sheep hunts in 1 year. And I drew the Chugach, I drew Peters Creek, and I'm the only non-resident tag, so I have 2 Dall sheep tags in my pocket for this summer.
Man, that is incredible.
I went from was completely shocked that I went ahead and bit the bullet and went on the Northwest Territories hunt, and then I go and draw it. And it was funny. I told my wife, I said, hey, what would be better than having 1 Dall sheep hunt? She goes, having a stone sheep hunt? I go, okay, well, you got me there, but what would be? I said, I drew in Alaska, and she was like, isn't that the same sheep you're already hunting? I'm like, yeah, it is, actually.
Man, that's crazy.
That's pretty crazy.
Are those August then?
It's actually August 23rd. I got the second hunt. It's August 23rd through September 4th, I believe. So pretty dang neat. Thanks. I'll have about a month, 3 weeks or so after my Northwest Territories hunt. So it's I'm going to go from a complete newbie Dall sheep, and hopefully, if everything, Lord willing, if everything works out, I'll have 2 Dall sheep after this summer. So pretty dang neat.
Yeah, that is neat. The only thing I'm sitting on so far is just a Utah deer tag, and that, like we said, I just have done dedicated hunters. So far that's it. But I've got a pile of applications in already, and we'll see where the cards fall.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Well, buddy, thanks so much for taking the time to go through everything so detailed with us, and wish you the best of success there on the Arizona apps. And obviously, you love hunting New Mexico every year, and so hopefully you draw your tags that you want, and just keep up the great work. You guys do such a great job over there at Go Hunt, and the detail between you and Brady, just so detail-oriented. It's awesome stuff. I just appreciate it.
Okay, we appreciate all that you do, and we're glad to be on, and thanks for having me on today. It was fun.
Yeah, I need a suggestion for the Go Hunt videos. I want to have a shoot-off between you and Brady with your bows.
Oh, yeah, gladly. Let's do it.
Have Lorenzo and Chris put an apple on their head and then have them just keep going out in distances.
No, I don't know if I'd take that one, but definitely we could do maybe we do a field day. We've got a great range up here in Cedar City. In fact, I was up yesterday shooting, and today it's snowing, but yesterday it was 50s. But yeah, maybe we get all those guys to come up and we do a field day and see how good Brady is. Yeah,
well, we've thrown down the gauntlet right now, so I guess it'll have to come to fruition. If he backs down from it, then we know he's chicken.
I don't think he'll back down.
He doesn't have a lot of back down. I can say that you have no chance if we're doing a beard length growing contest. You might as well just stay home because he can win that easily.
Man, I cannot. I tell you what, I would grow one if I could. I don't. Do you know Jeff Baird there from St. George? The Baird oil guy. Do you know him?
Yeah, he's got squirrels. He's got squirrels hanging out in his beard.
So he's become a good friend of mine, and we get to chit chat every now and then. But every time I see him, I feel like I'm ashamed of my beard.
Unworthy.
I'm unworthy, and Brady's cut from that same cloth. That guy can grow a beard, I think, overnight. I definitely can't.
Yeah. Right on, buddy. It's great talking to you. Thanks for your time. God bless you, and I'll see you down the road here.
Likewise.
All right, buddy.